Hi, I'm Matt Christensen with KWQC TV6 News. We're gearing up for the Illinois primaries on Tuesday, March 17th, and we're focusing today on Illinois Congressional District number 17. And that seat's already held by Democratic Representative Eric Sorensen. He's not facing a primary challenger, so he'll move on to the November election. But there are two Republicans vying to challenge him. That's Dylan Bancel and Julie Bickelhaupt. I sat down with all three candidates this week and asked them the same 6 questions that could help you make your decision.
Julie Bickelhaupt. I'm running for the Illinois 17th Congressional District. I'm a farmer. I'm a mother. I have 3 kids. I also am the county board chair here in Carroll County, and we run insurance business in town as well.
Okay, let's get started with the questions. The first one's about what's going on in Iran. Do you support the United States' military involvement there, and what needs to happen in the Middle East to ensure the safety of Americans?
You know, and I've had this question before. Iran has been an ongoing situation, which has started many administrations before we're currently in. I do believe that we had to follow through and make sure that we are able to protect the United States in national security situations like this. And I do think it just happened to be the time to do it, and the ability to really go in and take on that situation. And this just happened to be the best time to do it.
Let's talk about the budget real quick. Congress keeps passing these short-term funding measures. What specific spending cuts or revenue changes would you support to put the federal budget on a more sustainable path?
Sure. So budget cut wise, I think we've been trying to do some of that with some of the DOGE efforts that have been done. Obviously, there were some issues with some fraud and waste that's been occurring in many different areas. You know, when you're running a business, you do some of the same sort of things. You try to figure out how to balance things, and you go, where is this not working? Where's money being used that it's not maybe for the best? And in those situations, I think that's a great tactic to start with, because when you can peck away at something that's unneeded or maybe being done improperly, it's the best way to start. I think there's a lot of other ways to start working on that as well. But, you know, that in itself is going to peck away at that pretty quickly.
Let's talk about healthcare for a moment. So costs for Medicare and other federal programs keep rising. So what reforms would you support to control those costs without reducing care for folks like seniors?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you know, the problem we got into there was when ACA began. That was a program that I didn't align with when it started. I believe in a free market system, and that kind of shut that down. It was claiming to not do that, but at the end, that's what it's done, and it's created loopholes for to really feed the pockets of insurance companies and some pharmaceutical companies, when really we want to see that those dollars and that control being in the hands of the account holder, the policy holder, and their ability to work with the doctors. So we need to really reboot that, maybe rebuild it, and see what we can do to give people options, and the options that work for them, not being really told how to use their insurance. And obviously, we need to protect our seniors. We need to protect really anyone that can hold a policy. That's important. And we all want good insurance. We all want to be protected when something goes wrong.
Let's talk about immigration. That's another hot topic, and it has been for years. And both parties now say that the system is broken. What specific policy changes beyond enforcement would you support to help fix the system?
On immigration.
Yeah.
So, well, you know, obviously we have rules for a reason. We have immigration processes for a reason, and that's to, you know, secure national security. We really have to make sure we're securing our border and vetting the people coming into our country. And really, we have a process to do that. The part where that fell apart at some point, that was the issue. We have to make sure that, you know, that we're doing that. There have been gangs and drugs come across the border, and we really have to make sure that's not happening, because it's been too the defeat of the people that actually live here. And that's not okay. So I really do feel like if we start from where we're supposed to and we run it the way it was originated with the rules and regulations and vetting process, um, we can bring the right people into our country. We want people to come to our country who appreciate America, who want to be here, who have the pride of an American. And we do that through that vetting process and making sure those people want to be here for the right reasons.
Let's talk about another issue that's important in Illinois 17, and that's folks who are going to be counting on Social Security as part of their retirement. Now, that system is projected to face shortfalls within the next decade. So, should Americans expect higher payroll taxes, a higher retirement age, or reduced benefits?
I think there's options to see any of those things. Obviously, Social Security has not been funded properly. I think, my generation going into Social Security and receiving that understood, you know, that's not going to be what I retire on. I'm going to have to invest other dollars. Obviously, a lot of companies have 401ks. That doesn't take care of the problem because there are some people who do have to survive on Social Security at the end of the day. But, I could see any one of those options you put out there being something that's going to have to be done. Increasing the working age, I hate to see that. We are living to be older, and they like to say the new 70s, the old 50 or whatever. So it is relevant that probably people are healthier and living longer these days. To you could expand that, but at the end of the day, most people retiring don't really want to see that. I think we have to look at all the options and see what can be done to rectify that situation and make sure people can semi retire on that. But like I said, I feel like most of my generation realized that's not going to be the whole picture of your retirement if you plan to retire pretty well.
Okay, last question already. Let's talk about artificial intelligence. So lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have warned that artificial intelligence is going to reshape the economy and perhaps spread misinformation. What kind of federal regulations, if any, should Congress place on companies who are developing advanced AI?
You know, I also believe, you look at social media and where that's gone, where it started, and there was very little potentially oversight on that. And it kind of snowballed. And now we're going back and looking at that and going, we probably should have set some parameters on that would protect people using it, especially young people. I think AI could be similar. It's something of the unknown. We have no idea where it's headed to or how it's going to be used. We can only assume. I do think it's important to protect people surrounded using that, or just what its abilities are. I don't know exactly what those are at this point. I think we can study that and try to assume what's going to be in the future. We don't always know that, but I do think finding some protective measures would be best in order to just make sure that we're not putting other people in the country at danger of those misinformations or just that information overload that could be out there.
Dylan, just tell me a little bit about yourself first. Who are you?
Yeah, Dylan Vansel. A little bit about my background. Well, I'm married to my lovely wife, Alyssa, and we have two boys, Mason and Easton, 7 and 9 years old, rambunctious boys. My background, I spent 10 years on the railroad. I spent a year in Montana. I spent 5 years in South Dakota. While I was out in South Dakota, I was actually the legislative director for the state of South Dakota for the UTU, the Railroad Union. My wife and I decided to start having kiddos, so we moved back home to be around family. Then I'd worked for Canadian Pacific out of the Quad Cities up in your guys' neck of the woods. Got tired of being gone 5 or 6 days a week, so we ended up actually starting Dame Fine Coffee. Now, Dame stands for myself, Dylan, my wife, Alyssa, and our two boys, Mason and Easton, who I just mentioned. We just opened up our 7th location just north of Peoria and Chillicothe here about 7 months ago. We also have a distribution company where we help about 40 other coffee shops with their weekly supplies. Um, I've been on my local school board now for 5 years. I'm on the Eagleview Community Health Board and also serve time on the Monmouth Chamber Board as well.
Cool. Okay, let's get into it. Okay, so the first question, do you support the United States' military involvement in Iran, and what needs to happen in the Middle East to ensure the safety of the United States?
Absolutely. So we can't allow Iran to have nuclear capabilities. We can't. When they go down the streets and chant death to America, those guys, they have one thing in mind, and it is to destroy America. And after the absolute slaughter and massacre of 30 to 40,000 people over the last few months, I'm glad that we have a president with a backbone that's willing to stand up and get rid of the threat there to America and keep peace in the Middle East.
Let's talk about the budget. Congress keeps passing short-term funding measures. What specific spend cuts or revenue changes would you support to put the federal budget on a sustainable path?
I mean, there's several things, but the biggest thing that I'm worried about, and what I think the midterm is, most people are going to be in tune to, is affordability in general. The biggest thing that I've been hearing lately is our healthcare system. I am sick and tired of the government just throwing money at things, thinking that's going to fix the problem. Until we get down to some of the root causes of these issues, we're never going to see anything change. With healthcare, you go to the hospital with a broken arm and you don't have health insurance, your bill might be $600. I go in with health insurance, my bill might be $5,000 or $6,000 for the same thing. Should be the same price, no matter whether you have insurance or not. And by doing that, that will lower our insurance premiums. And we also have to break up these monopolies within healthcare. Aetna owns the health insurance, the pharmacies, the PBMs, the physicians, the healthcare facilities, and they own a bank on top of all of it. We have to break it up. That vertical integration has absolutely destroyed competition in not only our healthcare system, but also our ag industry as well.
So that leads me right into the next question, Dylan. This one has to do with healthcare when it comes to federal programs like Medicare. Those programs costs keep rising too. So what reforms would you support to control those costs without reducing care for seniors who rely on those programs?
So we have to make those programs stronger for the people that actually need them. Now, myself, I was raised by a single mother. My brother and I both lived on food stamps and Medicaid. Lived it all 18 years of my childhood. We have to get these people that are able-bodied Americans. We've got to get them back to work. Now, Senator John Kennedy just came out with a report here last week or so, showed we have to redefine what poverty is, because by the time that you receive all of these different benefits, you're making about $65,000 a year off the taxpayers tax-free. So we've got to get it's not a handout, it's a hand up. I'm all willing and wanting to help those who are willing to help themselves. We've got to get back to that, which in turn will make this system stronger for the people that need it, like our seniors.
Let's talk about immigration real quick. So both parties have said that the system is broken, right? But what specific policies or changes beyond enforcement would you support to fix the system?
So, I mean, there's good people that want to come to America, and I agree with that wholeheartedly. And those people should be allowed to come to America. We have to do proper, vetting. We have to do proper background checks. I'm all for that. Maybe there's some options there where we can speed up some of those things, or maybe we need some more staff in that area where we can help process some of these things a little quicker. But having an open border and just allowing anybody to walk into our country is not the right answer.
Let's talk about Social Security. So the trust fund that funds that is projected to face shortfalls already within the next decade. Should Americans expect higher payroll taxes, a higher retirement age, or reduced benefits?
As somebody that's younger myself, I'm worried, is Social Security going to be there when I get to 67, or will it be 85 by then? I don't know. But what we're doing now, we have to, I mean, look at all the fraud that they've uncovered with Social Security and all these people that have passed years ago that are still collecting paychecks. We have to reduce the fraud, waste, and abuse within that system, which again will make it stronger. I I don't know what they're going to do to fix it. I don't have the answers to all of it. I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke and tell you I do. Myself, I'm investing in my own 401ks, my own Roth IRAs, so that way I know I'm covered when the time comes for myself to retire and my family. So we're going to have to make some cuts. Those are some hard conversations that we're going to have coming up. But I think we're heading in the right direction with getting rid of a lot of the waste, fraud, and abuse within that program to help sustain it a little further.
All right, last question. Lawmakers have warned that artificial intelligence could reshape the economy and spread misinformation. So what kind of federal regulations, if any, should Congress place on companies developing advanced AI?
AI is such a new thing, but it's evolving just rapid pace. I am worried it is going to reduce jobs. Now, some of these guys that are developing the AI say, no, it won't affect anything. Yes, it will. And that's the whole intent is to have things more automation. The government's got to really take a look at and see what can be done to regulate. The last thing we want is millions of people without jobs and replaced by AI right off the get-go. Now we're going to have to slowly phase some of this stuff in. And I'm not about big government and government being involved in everything, but when it comes to the American people and millions of people losing their jobs, we have to take a long, hard look at it and see what some of the phases that we can do over time instead of just this rapid acceleration.
Okay, Congressman,
Yep.
do you support the United States military involvement in Iran, and what needs to happen in the Middle East to ensure the safety of the States?
Look, I take this question very seriously because I sit on House Armed Services Committee, and everything that we do in this committee is for the safety of all of our troops. And I'm cognizant that we've moms and dads with kids that are in harm's way in the Middle East. Look, nobody in our congressional district, people in our congressional district and across this country want another forever war. They feel the pain still, especially in Army Town. You still feel the pain. You still hear the stories of Iraq and Afghanistan. I hear the stories from my next door neighbor, Iraq War veteran, who doesn't want to see that happen again. And look, back here at home today, we've got a problem not just because of Iran, but because this administration hasn't focused on lowering people's costs. Now gas are going up and up and up through the roof, and our constituents can't pay for it. I don't want to hear from the administration saying that this is a short-term thing. Pain being felt by constituents, and that pain has to go away today.
Let's talk about the budget a little bit.
Yeah.
So Congress keeps passing short-term funding measures.
Right.
What specific funding cuts or revenue changes would you support to put the federal budget on a sustainable path?
I don't think people understand that when we are in a continuing resolution, which we have been in my entire time in Congress, that there is so much waste of your federal dollars. We need to have a balanced budget. We need a budget that can pass using both Republicans and Democrats to get it across the line, not just doing these situations where we kick the can down the curb. Right? We need to make sure that we're solving the problems, so making sure that we're taking care of that debt, because I don't think that it's right. We are allowing our kids and our grandkids to have to deal with the because there were politicians in Washington that couldn't solve the problem today.
Let's talk about health care. Costs for Medicare and other federal health programs keep rising. So what reforms would you support to control those without reducing care for seniors?
Just yesterday, I was at McDonough Hospital, and I was listening to not only the people there that are running the hospital, but the mayor himself, who said that the big, ugly bill is almost due their hospital in. Let's understand the real implication. When you cut Medicaid reimbursement, you're going to cut rural hospitals. We're going to have fewer people that are connected to health. On top of that, from December to today, we have tens of thousands of people in Illinois 17 alone that have been priced out of their health care because the AC subsidies went away and there was no option. That is a failure on the administration by not putting forth to make sure that we are connecting more people to good quality health care. Because in the richest country in the world, why can't we make sure that we're care of our neighbors?
Immigration. So both parties say the system is broken, right? What specific policy change, other than enforcement, would you support the system?
Look, I'm a supporter and a co-sponsor of the ACT, which is a bipartisan piece of legislation that would give us comprehensive immigration reform. And I have said from the very beginning, we need to make sure we are securing our border, but we also have to make sure that there is a pathway to legally become American citizens, because we're seeing the problem with that right now. Too many people are not working in, for instance, in farming. We need to make sure that we have the people that are going to be able to work in farming or processing. Look, there's some 25 different languages that are spoken at the roof at the Joslyn Tyson plant, and the same thing at the Smithfield plant. We need to make sure that there is that pathway for citizenship so that we have ways that are necessary to do the work.
Security. The trust fund for Social Security is projected to face shortfalls within the next decade. Should Americans expect higher pay raises, a higher retirement age, or reduced benefits?
To find a way to pay for it, because everybody who is paid into Social Security, that is funding that they have earned, that they have rightly earned. Going all the way back to my very first job, at the age of 15, when I worked at Arby's, eat a beef and cheddar, by the way. I still love it. But I was paying security back then. That is funding that everybody paid into, and they deserve that in the end. We need to make sure it goes back to a budget process, that the federal government is living within its means, but also isn't shortchanging the people who've paid into Social Security, because you have earned that.
Final question. Lawmakers have warned that artificial intelligence is going to read the economy, but also spread misinformation and come with other problems. What kind of federal regulations, if any, should Congress place on companies that are developing advanced AI?
Look, AI have an unbelievable opportunity for us as Americans to be able to find cancer, or it is able to be seen by a doctor's eyes, to be able to point where the tornado is going to touch down hours in advance to get people out of harm's way. But AI is also going to be used against us. We don't have the guardrails that are in place to protect people. Already seeing that today, especially in politics. We're seeing that, where AI is coming into fruition, which is creating a narrative that is just to try to bend the truth. Look, I got elected just because, not because I got the weather right every day, but because I was there for people every day. I earned the trust because I was in the district for 20 years. We need to make sure that that is front and center in electing anybody, whether that is a member of Congress, whether that is a president, or whether that is somebody at the school board. Making sure that we focus on understanding who these people are, and even my challengers. Making sure that we understand who they are, but we hold them to the fire to make sure that their values align with those of us who are living today to make ends meet in our district.